For years, the world was told this plane was a spy, that it had crossed into Soviet skies on purpose, that its pilots knew exactly where they were. But when the black boxes finally surfaced, a full decade later, the tapes told a different story. The crew never knew anything was wrong. Not the course, not the fighter behind them, not the missiles. In this episode, you'll find out how a jumbo jet wandered hundreds of miles off course into the most heavily guarded airspace on Earth, and why not one of the 3 veteran pilots on board ever noticed. You'll hear the cockpit recording of their final moments. You will learn the single switch that may have doomed them, and you'll see how this one flight changed the technology in your pocket today. It's August 31st, 1983. Korean Airlines Flight 207 is a Boeing 747, a jumbo jet, registration HL7442. It's flying from New York to Seoul with a refueling stop in Anchorage, Alaska. On board are 246 passengers and 23 crew, 269 people in total. 22 of them are children under the age of 12. One passenger is a sitting United States Congressman, Larry McDonald, on his way to mark the 30th anniversary of the defense treaty between the United States and South Korea. In the left seat is Captain Chun Bungin, 45 years old. He's elite. He graduated top of his Air Force class, flew in an aerobatic squadron, and once piloted South Korean's presidential jet. He has more than 10,000 hours in the air, over 6,000 of them in the 747 itself. Beside him is First Officer Sung Dong-ho, 47, and Flight Engineer Kim Ui-dong, 31. All 3 are seasoned. But there is a quiet problem. This crew has spent 5 days crossing time zones and the international datelines. 22 hours in Anchorage, then 31 more in New York. Their body clocks are scrambled. And tonight, fatigue may matter more than experience. The plane lifts off from Anchorage in the dark and turns west, out over the Pacific. To navigate, the 747 relies on something called an inertial navigation system, INS for short. Think of it as a very precise, dead-reckoning computer. You tell it exactly where you are on the ground, and from then on it tracks every moment, calculating the plane's position without needing any signal from outside. In 1983, it was a state-of-the-art, but the system only works if it's actually flying the plane. And just 10 minutes after leaving Anchorage, Flight 007 begins to drift, just slightly, a few miles north of where it should be. The drift doesn't correct, it grows, miles after mile, hour after hour. The gap between where the plane is and where it's supposed to be keeps widening. The most likely explanation investigators later concluded is that the autopilot was left in a basic heading mode, locked to a fixed compass direction, instead of following the precise route programmed into the navigation computer. It's a subtle mistake, and no one in the cockpit catches it. By now, the drift has carried Flight 007 somewhere it should never be, directly over Soviet territory. First, the Kamchatka Peninsula, then Sakhalin Island, home to secret Soviet military bases, at the height of Cold War. To the Soviets watching their radar, this is not a lost airliner. This is an intruder. And they've recently been tracking American spy planes in the very same skies. At 1742, a Soviet interceptor, an Su-15 fighter, takes off from Sokol Air Base. Its pilot is Major Gennady Osipovich. He closes in behind the giant aircraft in the dark. Osipovich later said he could see the plane had 2 rows of windows. He believed it was a Boeing, but to him that meant nothing. A civilian jet, he reasoned, could be converted for military use. He fires warning shots from his cannon, but it's night and his shells have no tracer rounds to light them up. From inside the 747, the crew sees nothing. Then, at this exact moment, Flight 007 does something that seals its fate. It calls Tokyo Air Traffic Control and requests a routine climb to a higher altitude, a normal step as the plane burns off fuel and gets lighter. As the jumbo jet raises its nose and slows slightly to climb, the fighter behind it nearly overshoots. To Osipovich, this looks like an evase maneuver. He became convinced the aircraft knows he's there and is trying to escape. The order comes down the chain of the command, blunt and final: destroy the target. At 26 minutes past 1800 hours Greenwich time, Osipovich fires 2 missiles. The first detonates about 160 feet behind the aircraft, spraying it with shrapnel. The plane does not explode. It does not fall from the sky. The damage is real, but the 747 keeps flying. This is where the recovered cockpit voice recorder becomes haunting. Because in the second after missiles strike, the crew has no idea they've been shot. Captain's first words are simply, "What happened?" First officer says, "What?" Captain says, "Retard throttles." First officer then responds, "Engines normal, sir." The engines are still running, but shrapnel has punctured the cabin, a warning alarm sound as the air pressure drops. The crew fights to keep control. Captain Chun switches off the autopilot and flies the wounded jet by hand. For roughly the next minute and a half, the recording captures them working the problem, calm, professional, still unaware of what hit them or why. Then about 1 minute and 44 seconds after the missile struck, both recorders fall silent. The aircraft came down near Monarazon Island in the cold water west of Sakhalin. All 269 people on board were killed, and then the truth disappeared. The Soviet Union denied involvement, then admitted the shootdown, but called the plane a spy. In secret, Soviet teams recovered the black box within weeks and hid them away. For nearly 10 years, the world had only theories. It wasn't until 1992, after the Soviet Union collapsed, that Russian President Boris Yeltsin finally handed over the hidden recorders. International investigators working in neutral France to keep things fair transcribed every second, and the tapes confirmed the most tragic possibility of all. The crew genuinely believed they were on course the entire time. There was no spying, no deliberate intrusion, just a navigation error that went unnoticed for hours until it carried a plane load of sleeping passengers into the worst possible place at the worst possible moment. The official finding: the crew failed to follow proper navigation procedures to keep the plane on track, most likely leaving the autopilot in the simple heading mode. And on the other side, the Soviet Air Defense Command assumed the jet was an American spy plane before they ever fired. The legacy of Flight 007 is bigger than most people realize. In its wake, a global rule was adopted banning the use of weapons against civilian aircraft in flight. It became binding international law in 1998. But the most far-reaching change is one you use almost every day. At the time, the Global Positioning System, GPS, was a military-only technology. After Flight 007, the United States made the decision to open GPS up for civilian use, so that no airliner would ever again drift hundreds of miles off course without knowing it. The satellite navigation in your phone, your car, your watch, its public availability traces directly back to this flight. 269 people boarded the plane believing they were going home. They were never knew they were lost. If you want more stories like this one, subscribe and hit the like button. It genuinely helps the channel. And tell me in the comments which aviation mystery should we cover next. Thank you so much for watching this video.